A few weeks ago, we took a look at William Jay's A Christian Contemplated. And this week, we're going to take a look at another book of William Jay's. This is his Autobiography. This is a 580-page book, 590 pages with an index and an appendix in the back. This is a cloth-bound, I believe. I'm making an assumption here. It feels as if it's just a regular hard cover, but I believe, just looking at the grain on it, that it is cloth-bound. It's rather difficult to determine that. But it is Smith-sewn, and I believe it is printed in the USA. So that's very cool as well. If you were looking for more information on William Jay, in this video, I'm not going to give very much about him for two reasons. One, of course, this is the autobiography. I don't want to spoil this book, but also I gave a lot of information about him in the last video, which will be linked in the description down below. Before we continue, also the links to this book and any other resources that I mentioned in this video will be in the description down below. So some information about William Jay that I will give is that he was born on 1769 and he died on 1853. He began preaching the gospel at the age of 19 years old, and he preached until the ripe age of 84. And he preached from the same pulpit for over 60 years. If you're new, let me welcome you now to Petra Publications. My name is Davis, and here on this channel, basically I just review Reformed Christian books, though sometimes I do step outside of that realm and may even review a book that is not even Christian. If I found it edifying, would like to share that with you. If you've been watching for a while, the links to my Patreon and PayPal are in the description down below. Thank you so much for your support. So now let's go ahead and dive into the review proper of this book. So this is, this next sentence that I'm going to share here is actually from Banner of Truth's website. They say that Jay's autobiography, quote, prepared during the closing years of his life, combines a personal narrative of old warm charm with the invaluable spiritual comment on the Christian life and ministry. And that pretty much sums up everything that I could possibly say about this book. But here are a few additional notes on this book that you might like to know prior to purchasing it and reading it. So first is, it consists of letters that he wrote to his children. And so each one is rather short. They're easy to read. They are comprehensive about his life, but also really understandable. They're not difficult to read, they're not difficult to understand. So they're short, but they're also in depth. They're very personable. They are very, it's like he's talking to you because he was writing to his children. The only thing that makes them a little bit longer, this is point 2 here, is that the editors occasionally add inserts into the letters. So you'll be reading, the letter, it'll be 3 or 4 pages long. Well, then there's an insert that the editors add. Maybe that's 8 pages, to give more context. It's very helpful information. It just it interrupts the flow of the letter. So what I tended to do as I was reading it was read through the letter straight and then go back and read the insert by the editors, and it just added more context to what I was reading. Third, the editors also add a section at the end of the book that gives a brief overview of Jay as a preacher and as an author, and both of those are very insightful, very helpful to understanding who Jay was from an outside view, instead of just from his own words. So also I'm gonna go ahead and read the table of contents now and show you what is inside this book, what exactly you will find. So first, you'll find a general introduction to the autobiography, which is about 11 pages. Part 1, this is split into different parts, the autobiography, and then that is split into, let's see here, 18 letters. Each one of them, he starts out at the beginning of his life and recounts most of what he can remember about his life. He talks about his marriage. He talks about meeting his wife, which I'm going to read a quote from later in this review. And talks about his children. It talks about his experiences as a pastor in the same church for so many years. Part 2 is a supplement to the autobiography. Part 3 is reminiscence of distinguished contemporaries, which is a fascinating section, and there are 18 of those as well. I'm sorry, 23. I thought that was a 5 there. 23 of those fascinating writings there. Part 4 is selections from the correspondence of the Reverend William J. Again, very interesting section. You see him write to his wife, you see him write to his friends, you see him write to all of these other people, and a very helpful section there. And then closing out, they have a concluding observation section, which is what I mentioned earlier. This is by the editors, Mr. J as a preacher and Mr. J as an author. My dog is barking. Then there's an appendix, and some corrections in the book are mentioned on that first page right here. So one thing I was going to say also is that this book does not only contain the autobiography, which of course is worth buying the book for already, but it also includes the letters which he sent, which I just mentioned, the biographical sketches, which are just so good, and he wrote those about his contemporaries, and then also a supplement to the autobiography written by the editors, which is also very helpful. So usually at this point in the review, I would ask the question, are there any better books on this topic? And I feel like perhaps I should just take this question out. If you've been watching for a while, you know that I just keep pleading not applicable. So maybe I should just take this part out of my review. But I've read Ryle's autobiography. That compares to this. And I'm also currently reading Hobson's autobiography, which I will be reviewing here shortly, hopefully, Lord willing. And they're all so very good. What distinguishes Ryle and William J. is that they're both written to their children. And so they have a very different style of writing. It's it's as if they were speaking to their children, the way they would have spoken to their children. And so I find that biographies written in this style are especially special and dear and just heartwarming, just because of that alone. So, are there any better books on this topic? I'm going to say no, but also yes, probably. There are probably better books, but I really like this one. So would I buy this book? Absolutely. And I mentioned this in the last review as well, of The Christian Contemplated. This is put out if you buy this edition, and I'm not aware of another one. But if you buy this one, this is Sprinkle Publications, and they are going out of business or have gone out of business. And so you can only buy them while they are still available. So I will link to it down below, but I can't promise that it will still be there by the time you are watching this video. So if you are interested in purchasing this book and reading it at some point, I highly, highly recommend that you do that as quickly as possible. And if you buy it from Reformation Heritage Books, which is where I'm linking it to or from, you can buy it for only $10 right now. So as of the making of this video. So I highly recommend that you go ahead and make that investment. It is worth doing so. So now I'm just going to read a couple of quotes from the book to show you some of his writing style. This is selections from all over the book. My first quote is from page 40, and I go all the way to 417. So lots of different places in the book, not all from the review or the autobiography itself. But on page 40, there's this really great proverb that he gives right here. He says, "They are best prepared to rule and govern who have previously learned to obey and serve." So essentially, no one should be in government or in a pastoral or eldership position without first having learned to obey and serve. Page 47, he says, "A remark had struck me in reading Johnson's Life of Watts, in which he says, 'The reason why the ancients surpassed the moderns was their greater modesty. They had a juster conception of the limitation of human powers, and despairing of universal eminence, they confined their application to one thing, instead of expanding it over a wider surface.'" Humility and modesty, really important things, especially when dealing with theology. Here's a little longer section here. But it's a quote from a, let's see, where did this come from? I believe this is an editorial insert. Actually, this is from a sermon that he preached. It is an editorial insert, but it is a sermon. So he says, "And you, my dear young friends, what shall I say to you? My heart feels for you, the enemy of your souls, eyes on you as prey. Disappoint his hope. Beware of the snares of the world, and particularly of an evil heart of unbelief in departing from the living God. Give up yourselves to the Lord by an early dedication, and you will find that his ways are ways of pleasantness, and all his paths peace. Your tears now at my departure show your affection for me." This is when he was leaving his chapel. He says, "You have given many evidences of it. Give one more. 'Tis my departing request. Recollect the many exhortations I have given you. Remember your Creator in the days of your youth. Seek him early, and you shall find him." That's so good. So good. And one thing that also stuck out to me as I was reading some of his other works, he truly had a passion for the youth of his time. He constantly was driving the idea that the youth of his time needed to serve the Lord. And there it was again. If you seek him in your youth, you shall find him. On page 83, he says, talking about holiness, he says, "Holiness is necessary to present peace and future glory. Without it, no man shall see the Lord. And so far is the doctrine of the cross from opposing this truth, that Jesus Christ crucified is the principle and end of it. The man who believes in him for righteousness." J.C. Ryle in his book Holiness says things very, very similar to that. Skipping forward a little bit here, page 161. This is a little bit longer of a quote here, but I think it's very important, and I wanted to insert this into the review as well. So he's talking about denominations, and he's saying that each denomination has its valid reasons for its doctrine and its valid reasons for the rejection of other doctrines. And I think this is so important today because we get into so many arguments about superiority of doctrine, superiority of denomination. And I just think it's not that important so long as the gospel is there. Secondary issues are secondary issues for a reason. And here's what Jay had to say on this matter. He says, "We may view denominations as we do individual Christians. None of them are absolutely perfect, and none of them are entirely defective. Neither is possessed and neither is destitute of every truth and every excellency. All of the members of the body have not the same quality or the same office, yet they are all alike parts, and though they may be compared, they are not to be opposed, and though one may be more admired, another is not more depreciated. One denomination may excel in diligence and zeal, another discipline and simplicity of worship, another in contention for purity of doctrine, another for intelligence and liberality. And thus they not only stand in the same relation to Christ, but are members of one another, checking each other's extremes and supplying each other's defects, and sharing each other's advantages, and so by mutuality to produce a comparative perfection in the whole." So he's saying if we have a wide variety of denominations, it keeps everyone in balance. It's like a check and balance. Are you in the extreme over here? Well, we'll balance that out by being in the extreme over here. And probably neither of those things are good, but at least it balances it out. And he's saying that within those things, you then have a perfect as a whole. And then we get into over here this is page 300. He is doing his brief sketch of John Ryland, who was a contemporary of his time, a mentoree of John Newton. and who also is actually, he also has a sketch of him in here as well. But he gave a few quotes from John Ryland that are pretty good, and I wanted to share those here. Just this one particular one was was exceptionally good. He says, "It is perilous to read any impure book. You will never get it out of your faculties till you are dead. My imagination was tainted young, and I shall never get rid of it till I get into heaven." And of course, I don't think we read too many dirty books today, at least as many as they did at the time. That was their entertainment. But today we look at YouTube videos, we watch movies, we watch all kinds of things that are filthy, they're disgusting, and they corrupt our imagination. I'm guilty of this as well. And they will never leave me until I die. And this advice right here is so sound. He's saying it's what was the word he used here? It is perilous to read any impure book. That's pretty strong language, and I think that definitely can be applied to our entertainment today, if not more so. And then I have one last quote here. I had a bunch. I typically write down my quotes on a sheet of paper like this, and I filled up this entire thing and the backside, so I had to select just a few, but I wanted to read this one as well, and we'll end on this one. This is about marriage, and he goes into this whole section here. He's talking about a Mr. Holmes Esquire. I don't know who that is. He left out the first name, so we don't know much about that. But while talking about him, he gives an account of his marriage, Holmes's marriage. And he says this. He says, "It is desirable when persons marry to marry as much as possible in their own religious community. To justify a contrary course, two things, at least, are necessary. First, that they hold the sentiments in which they differ with moderation, and feel them to be subordinate. And, secondly, that they would consent to attend the same place of worship. Worshipping together cherishes and promotes social and devout affections, and has a lively and favorable effect upon children and servants. What evil consequences have I often seen arising from husbands and wives, fathers and mothers, always repairing to separate sanctuaries or worshipping alternately at different places." And so, myself included in this list, or in this statement, if you are looking to be married, either look for someone in your religious community, same convictions, or someone and yourself following at least those two exemptions. All right, well, I believe that is all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully this video was helpful to you in some shape, way, or form. And if it was, I'd love to hear from you in the comments down below. I always love hearing from you. Yeah, that is all I have. So Lord willing, I will see you again very soon. God bless.